Alrighty. So if you're just joining, I am Her Ladyship Isabel de la Hoya of Palantir. The instructor of this class is unfortunately ill, so we are going to have a conversation on medieval snacks. It is unfortunately not going to be as organized as it was originally planned. However, her handout will be available throughout later on today on the website, as well with hopefully many more handouts from the class. So I do thank you all for joining. So just to baseline, how many people here aren't familiar with medieval food? Okay. So when you think about medieval snacks, some of the things you do definitely want to talk about is things that are non-perishable. Things like sausage and cheese and bread, and some of the foods that are going to be some of your high-status foods, things like gingerbread, for instance, which is pretty much just conspicuous consumption. Visit the home of someone very wealthy. You're more than likely, if you're high status enough, to be offered something like gingerbread or something that has a lot of spices, that is going to kind of show off how much money they have. This is my conspicuous consumption. You know, look how rich I am. I can literally feed you money. You're also going to think about things that travel very easily, road food, things people have taken on campaign, things they feed the army, very easy to contain. Cheese is a wonderful example. Cheese is pretty much a loaf of milk. And there's going to be a wonderful cheese class later on today by Mistress Alianora. She's based in Palantir's cheese snack oral. So if you're interested in cheese, I highly recommend you check that out. But you're going to want things that are going to not spoil. And so what cheese does is you take milk and you spoil it in a very controlled way. And once you do that, you have something that's going to be essentially self-ish stable, I guess. I mean, you do have to be careful with it, but you do have to be a little bit careful with it, but it's going to be good for travel far longer than most other foods are going to be, especially when you add the sauce. A lot of things that you're going to see on a digital table, or at least in the Kingdom of Palantir, are some really good period snacks. So you see a lot of summer sausages. You see cheese, you see fruit, you see like little baked goods, and those are going to be wonderful kind of medieval snacks. So once again, if you're just joining, unfortunately, the teacher of this class is ill, so we're basically going to have a roundtable discussion on snacks. I do apologize that this has happened. It's just I was informed about it about 20 minutes ago. So does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have anything they want to add? You know, we're going to turn this into a roundtable.
So I don't know if anybody has run into this, but at my barony, we have we normally have our hospitality table at events, but it's normally loaded up with stuff that is really not portable for people. So like people will come in, but they have to like sit down and have their stuff with them. Does anybody have any particular favorite, like, I can carry this around an event and make sure that all of my people are fed and taken care of throughout the day ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. You can do like little small hand pies. And you do them, and the hand pies are overwhelmingly medieval, especially if you use a hot water crust, which kind of stands up, and they can be sweet, they can be savory, and you can fill them with any number of things. And I'm sorry, who was it that asked that question? If you can just identify yourself.
Oh, hi, I'm Marion Compton. I'm from Atlantia.
Well, nice to have you. Does anyone else have any ideas for her?
I've often done some, like you said, hand pies, but like I'll take like a mushroom pie recipe and just make it into a hand pie, and that works well. And I'm not as worried about, you know, meat going bad or sitting out in the heat as much.
Yeah. And of course, you can always stash yourself a cooler underneath your table.
Yeah.
Well, is hospitality tables at events something you often have in your kingdom?
Yeah, pretty much every barony or shire encampment plus the royal tents at pretty much every event has a hospitality table of some size. Normally, it's stuff like we try to do cheeses, we try to do cut meats and stuff like that. But we have what I've noticed with my barony is that we have a lot of people all over the place at events that don't usually get to stop by the hospitality table or don't always have the time to stop and actually pick stuff up. So I was trying to come up with a way of essentially making a picnic basket that I can take around and make sure that the people that are always really involved are actually having time to eat and drink their water and that kind of thing.
Just an idea I had real quick. Don't underestimate the power of sticks. Little skewers, they can load up, especially if you make everything into cubes about 1 inch. You could stab like half a meal worth of food in about 30 seconds and just kind of carry it around in your hand. And that can apply to a variety of things.
That idea, thank you.
Myself and my friend Mrs. Eleonora are just in seeing, especially near the end of the event, where the table that we're hosting still has food on it, loading everything up on trays, wandering around, and of course, seeing Palantir. So that is one way to get it done. We've also been known to pass stuff out during court. That's, of course, if your kingdom culture allows that kind of thing.
Okay.
So another really great thing is baskets of fruit.
Yeah.
And depends on how strictly period you want to keep things. But some of your more exotic fruits, like bananas and stuff. I mean, I guess bananas don't really seem very exotic to us, but that is definitely a New World fruit. Obviously, your mileage is going to vary. There's no one right way to do things as far as how period appropriate you keep things. But things like, grapes and apples and things of that nature those go back to biblical times. So there's most definitely foods that were available in period.
Don't underestimate good bread.
Absolutely.
Making flat bread not only gives them something to eat, it gives them something to put the other food on and can be used like as a plate. Cookies. Cookies are very medieval. You've got cookies that have nuts in them. You can also do cookies that are gluten-free for your other people. You can also do cookies and bread that are vegan, so that everyone will have something to eat.
Which would be better, shortbreads, soda breads, or yeast breads?
All of the three. I would do a yeast bread and do it and cook it like a flat bread. You could make it, this big around, and then you could lay like meat and cheese on top of it. Crackers are really good to go with your meat and cheese. Shortbread, if you make your shortbread with like almond butter instead of regular butter, you've got your gluten-free. and then I grind my own pea flour, and I've made shortbread with pea flour that gives it a little nutty taste. It was really delicious for our people who are gluten-free. There's tons and tons of recipes. There's a bread recipe that is made with dill, and it's actually made into the bread itself, and then it's the dough is divided into 3 parts, and between each part you spread it out, and between each layer you put cheese. It's basically a medieval Roman pizza.
Oh,
Yes. There's, you know, all kinds of things that you can add rosemary to your bread, you know, to make your bread more savory than sweet. I do a lot of fritters. They're better hot, but I make fritters, and one of the fritters I make is a bacon and cheddar fritter that our barony seems to like a lot. And the fighters do too. Everybody likes bacon. There's, you know, all kinds of breads and things that you can make. You can, I've taken like a sausage and wrapped it in the bread and then baked it so that it's kind of like a pig in a blanket. And it's sort of like a play off of a meat pie. There's, you know, you can always make tons of meat pies, and they're pretty well preserved when they're covered in the dough.
What
And
about
ladies and gentlemen, if you're not familiar, who was just speaking is Her Ladyship Baptista, who pretty much is the bread goddess of Palantir. So she definitely knows her stuff when it comes to breads and baking and things of that nature. So just a few moments ago, someone had asked a question about people being better able to drink wine, ale, and mead rather than water. So the issue really comes from the contaminated water. People did drink water. They drank spring water, they drank boiled water, especially if you're higher class and you had the manpower to make that food and make that water safe for you. But the reason people tended to drink alcohol is in order to make alcohol, you would boil it first. That would make it safe to drink. And then adding the alcohol would keep it safe to drink. And the ale that people and the wine that people drank all day long was not nearly as strong as the wine or ale you would drink at your average event or post-travel to get drunk. And the fritters really are great. Baptista makes some wonderful fritters. And every culture fries dough from the dawn of time. So they're incredibly period.
Also, a note.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's short. Just recently, I found out that cannolis are medieval. They were actually done in the 13th century. Mm-hmm. And the Greeks tried all kinds of things. So
I just wanted to note on the beer, there's actually a kind of a not really a waste product, but kind of a second run of beer that's specifically meant to be in large volumes and for day drinking, usually around 1 or 2% alcohol. That's a small beer, kind of left from the leavings of making the regular beer. So there was almost a alcohol-free beer option to kind of day drink all day that people could have. That was still somewhat nutritive.
It's very interesting. Does anyone have any other questions? Or, one thing that Palantir puts on a lot are digital tables, where you get a lot of that. And that's kind of some of the foods you tend to see. One of the things that I have done recently is I've gotten a, the thing that you keep the food warm in with the fire underneath. I'm so sorry, words are...
Chafing dish?
Yeah, chafing dish. Thank you. I apologize. Chafing dish. I've gotten a couple of those, and I've gotten out just sliced ham or put chicken and stuff out like that, cooked chicken. Um, and that seems to go over very well, especially if you're outside and you're cold. If you have something warm that you can give people, that tends to go over amazing well. So we had mentioned earlier using bread as a plate, which, I mean, come on, that's a trencher. You can't get any more period than that. Another thing that is really, really great is some of those pressed palm leaf plates. They're disposable. They're a lot more eco-friendly, and they look like little wooden plates, and you can get them fairly cheaply on Amazon. And I've been using those a lot lately. So, let's see, Perez, do you have a question?
Hi, yes, thank you. So first off, I forget who it was who was talking, but I did hear mention of things for vegans and vegetarians. So a big thank you, because my lady is vegetarian. She also has some other health stuff that limits how much dairy and particularly cheese, saturated fat things that she can imbibe in a day. So that means in mundane life, for her to get enough protein and get those macros, we're leaning heavily on things like seeds, nuts, and particular grains like quinoa, freekeh, those sorts of things. Some of those are obviously period. I don't know all of them, but I was just wondering if we could kind of get, because I heard nuts mentioned generically, but what nuts specifically are we talking about?
Walnuts.
Most nuts, you want to avoid peanuts if you're wanting to stay strictly European medieval. But definitely things like almonds. Almonds were everywhere in the medieval world. And believe it or not, almond milk is not new. Almond milk was in, let's just say, almost everything. I'm going to get into this a little bit later in my class on why people ate the way they did. But vegan food is incredibly medieval. We're talking large swaths of the calendar where you can't have meat, you can't have eggs, you can't have dairy, you can't have, well, you can have seafood. But if you're poor, you don't have access to those animal fats. You don't have access to that cheese or that dairy or that white meat, which is what they called it. So you ate vegan kind of by default. There are an unending amount of vegan recipes. When you start talking about fats, most people only had access to animal fats, but olive oil was a thing. It was kind of expensive, but it definitely was a thing. They also had apparently rapeseed oil, I just found out, or I'm sorry, linseed oil. Not rapeseed oil, linseed oil, which was apparently a dietary oil as well. But yeah, you absolutely have access to that. Most people in period that they lived in a town had, or not a big city, but a town, had some sort of garden plot, especially if you lived in the country. And pretty much any vegetable you can grow, you can throw in a pot and make pottage. Lentils. Lentils is an amazing source of protein and is ridiculously period. And you can make an amazing pottage with a bag of lentils, an onion, some garlic, and some couple of spices. And it's filling, and it's cheap if you want to serve it at an inn.
One thing that is I've not seen done, but seems like it could work fairly well, is whenever you have an idea for some sort of hand pie or something that has a crust or a wrap around it, is substituting grape leaves for that and basically making a variant of dolmades, and which is essentially take a rice filling with some seasoning and wrapped in grape leaves. They are a little fussy to make, but honestly, once you've done one, and you've done about 5 or 10, they get very, very quickly and probably not that much longer to do than futzing with the crust. And then you can, cook the whole thing, and suddenly you've gone, you're gluten-free, you're also vegetarian and quite possibly vegan. So you've got something for both of those groups.
Along those same lines, you can also wrap your stuff in cabbage leaf. You want to like parboil your cabbage first, so that the leaves are become pliable, and you can wrap it. But that works really well. Another thing that I've served that's been pretty popular, at least in my area, is if you do pickled eggs. Pickled eggs tend to go over really well. And again, for a lot of vegetarians, pickled eggs are, a good protein option.
Oh yes, and pickled eggs, absolutely. Eggs especially were ubiquitous. You pretty much had those fowl for the eggs, and you generally wouldn't kill the fowl until the end of their life, because the eggs are more valuable. Because once you get chicken, or really a duck or a goose on more than chickens, they can't give you any more eggs.
I've also had, sometimes we'll do what I call lunch in a jar, where I take a jam jar and I put in like 3 or 4 slices of beets or carrots, and sometimes I'll do a mixed vegetable kind of a thing with carrots and a little bit of onion, and then I throw in an egg, and then you have a piece of bread with that, and you're pretty much good to go.
Mm.
How ubiquitous was different types of jerky?
Oh man, jerky was everywhere. Especially when you're talking about like traveling rations. And they would absolutely dry meat. They would absolutely salt meat. That was one of the largest ways of preservation. In fact, a lot of your stores would be essentially jerky, and you'd have to rehydrate it. You'd have to wash it in order to be able to use it a lot of times, depending on how much salt content it had. But oh yeah, absolutely, every kind of jerky they would absolutely abuse, because of course we're talking no refrigeration, and so a lot of food would be preserved.
One thing on the jerky note that works really well with a lot of the period animals that they made jerky of, to make jerky well, you need a really, really lean animal, like spent laying hens or spent dairy cows or any of the game that they would have largely been able to hunt. So it capitalizes on a meat that that can be very hard to use when it's fresh. It works a lot better if you both for the salt, the salting tends to get a little bit excessive when it's that lean, but it dries out and then rehydrates a lot better if you don't have any fat in the way.
So last year I did an experiment, and the Palantir Cooks Guild put on a soup kitchen one day for Palantir. One of the things that Palantir does is at a foreign war, whenever the army comes back, they come to our Central Kingdom Pavilion, and kind of like will drop. But they generally, we pass out pickles and jerky and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and noodle soup. So for one day, the Cooks Guild last year decided they were going to do something that was very period. So we had preserved meat that people made, and we had bone broth, and we had bread and cheese and butter that was churned on site. But one thing that myself and Dina here did one day is we cut up and salted a bunch of pork and a bunch of beef. And I'm nervous. I knew on a very logical level that that much salt would kill everything, because we sliced it thin and then we salted it, and then we kind of dried it with paper towels, and then we packed it in salt. And it was what? We did that in February, January. So it was not refrigerated from the moment we brought it home from the store until we fed it to the Army. Now, we did feed it to our husbands first at Gulf Wars to make sure they didn't get sick before we fed it to the Army. But it was an incredibly fun experiment. One of the period sources suggested that we it several times and then boil it in wine. So we did that with it, and then we still went on and cooked it after that. That was really fun, and didn't make anyone sick because that much salt can kill everything.
Okay, so I mentioned the preserved pears. It was an experiment that I did for Queen's Prize, and it's actually in the Scarpe book. I have one around here. I'll show you in a minute. But it's a period recipe where you take the pears and you take the skin off and everything, and you boil them literally in sugar and water. And then you let them cool off, and you do that for 6 straight days. Bring it to a boil, let them go for about 7 to 10 minutes, and then you let it cool down overnight. I did that 4 or 5 times. We had tons of jars. And it was just a great experiment. 1, it worked out. And 2, a lot of people liked it. We have a Baroness of Three Rivers here in Callantyre, and she's vegan, and she took 3 of my jars because it's literally nothing but sugar, water, and pears. So totally vegan, totally vegetarian, not diabetic friendly at all.
They are delicious, though.
They're really good. If you do overboil the pears, you will literally turn it into jam, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Did that too. But it goes great on your breads that Her Ladyship Baptista talked about. If you have some kind of crouton, you can do that. You can use it as breakfast food. You can use it on top of meats, so you have your meat and your fruits. There's a lot of really great opportunities there, and I'll dig out that book and put the ISBN in the chat for anybody who wants to look at some more of those things.
So we just had Mistress Baroness Eleonora join the chat. She's on a snack oral, so I'm quite sure she would have some wonderful things to add as well. You just muted yourself. And she's also one of the hosts of this symposium. This actually whole thing was her idea.
But Isabel did a lot of the legwork, so she can't blame it all on me. Okay, I'm coming in a little late because I came from another class that sadly an instructor wasn't able to make it, and we wanted to give him a little time. So I'm not quite sure what you guys have all discussed already. But you know, it sounds like we talked about jerkies and sausages, and I'm assuming everybody knows that grabbing a hunk of cheese and a loaf of bread is always a good thing. Any period fruit that you can bring to the table is wonderful. Also, something that a lot of people don't think about is if you have pre-vinegared vegetables, you can, I've done some things with camping where you don't need as much as a cooler. So it could be really be helpful as well while you're taking things to an event with you. So if you pickled some vegetables ahead of time, some carrots, some pickled eggs, whatever you might like to munch on, taking something pickled and taking it out and throwing it in a bowl is a wonderful, wonderful thing as well. Hummus, hummus, vegetables, a bread, anything like that, any of those spreads that you take along, you can put it in a bowl and put it out as well. So, you know, bringing snacks along, nuts, if you're nut friendly, there are people that have allergies, there are people that avoid the fats in them, things like that. If you're nut friendly, a good handful of nuts is also a good period snack. One of the things that I like to remind people is just even if you're taking something that is kind of borderline, make sure it's done really simply. The simpler it is, the more it's going to be seen as a period snack. And if you're planning on doing like a little snack table, a little refreshment table at an event that you're at, atmosphere is as important as the food. So if you were to take along a tablecloth, some wooden bowls, things like that to utilize instead of putting it in a plastic bowl or a paper plate or things like that, it goes a long way to creating a more period atmosphere when it comes to setting up a little snack table or something like that when you are at an event. And excuse me, I know those are always very well received. I like to think of it as a mini vigil table. While it's not really a celebration for anyone, I have very high standards for myself and how things are presented. So if I think of it as a little mini vigil table, I'm going to have a snack out for household and friends and things like that. I like to take the time to create that little bit of atmosphere that goes with it. If you're doing it for yourself and it's just something that's in a little baggie that's in your bag, that takes care of that too. Let's see. I'm just looking through. Falafel, also a vegetarian thing. Falafel will travel very, very well. It can be eaten cold or room temperature. So if you know you're leaving the house, it's very friendly to regular temperatures. So you could put that in your bag, take a little falafel, a little hummus, a little baggie of vegetables, boom, voila, there's your lunch. But be warned, other people might come up and ask if you have more because everybody loves falafel. So, and there are easy ways to do this for somebody that's going, oh my gosh, I don't want to go through the whole thing of making falafel from scratch. You can get falafel snack mix, falafel mixes in some of the Middle Eastern stores. And even if you go online, you may be able, it's a company called, I think it's called Fantastic World or something like that. I don't know if I saw it. But they basically have a falafel mix that you mix up, you fry it, and you're done. They also have a dehydrated, oh my goodness, hummus which is basically the ground soybeans, but with a little hot water, you can reconstitute your hummus. If you want to get fancy, put a little extra garlic in it if you're me, pour a little extra virgin olive oil on top, and you're ready to go. So if you're not wanting to take a cooler, or if you're wanting to go really easy, as long as you have access to hot water, you can make that on site and not have to worry about traveling with the foods as well either. And it has a very good flavor. A lot of people don't have that have tasted it. I take it with me when I go camping. And in our camp for a while, Friday was Friday. It was all the yumminess that was fried. So I would mix up a batch of the instant falafel, mix up a batch of the instant hummus, so I didn't have to keep it in a cooler all week. And it would disappear like gangbusters. So I see a lot of really good comments coming in as well. So make sure you check the comment section before you leave, because there's a bit of discussion on salted meats versus jerky, things like that. So I wanted to throw that out there. And there's a conversation going on as well. Let's see, what else? Soy proteins. Oh, that's for camping, sorry. Pre-cooked bacon. It can be your friend if you're going to an event. Bacon is period as a cured meat. You get the little packages pre-baked bacon. You take it with you. You open it up. You can cut it in half. You can put it out. Boom! You have an instant little snack that you've not had to deal with refrigeration with. I'm just looking on my list of suggestions for camping without refrigeration. I didn't even think about doing that as a class this time. If you, let's see. If you're going in the morning, Callantyre has a tradition of what we call fighter biscuits. Fighter biscuits are absolutely amazing. They're wonderful little tidbits that you could take with you. That basically they're like a little bit, they're the Bisquick appetizer biscuits. So there's sausage, cheese, and the biscuit in it. But by the time you get it all mixed up and it gets baked, it looks like a little, almost bread ball. It's a little lumpy for a bread ball, but it would be a wonderful snack to take along. It is not 100% period, I will say that, but they're little protein bites and they're amazing. We do let people know that if you are making it, use it with full fat cheese if at all possible, because it does change the texture and it does change the flavor. There are also gluten-free versions of the Bisquick out there that can be utilized. Not trying to push something that's not 100% period, but if you are looking for a period feel, that will work as well. Crackers are basically a flatbread. Most crackers are considered period. Flatbreads, yum, yum, yum. Let's see. Pretty much, if you were to have any question about it, if something is period or not, if you want to take it along as a little snack, I would say to just do a little list. Like if you're wanting vegetables, do a search of vegetables found in medieval Europe. Another snack that I really like and people tend to really enjoy is wafers and snow. And what wafers and snow are is basically a pizzelle. And then you make whipped cream. Now the snow, the original recipe had a little bit of rose water thrown in. Originally, believing, if I can remember off the top of my head, I think it's an English recipe. It had a little rose water thrown in, and when it was presented with a little rosemary on top. But basically, you're talking about whipped cream and pizzelles, and you're making these lovely little I usually make sandwiches with it or things like that. Also, wafers and cheese are very popular. So if you were to make pizzelles and not necessarily put your anise flavoring or different flavorings in it, you could put cheese in between them and melt the cheese, which was also a period documentable type of street food. If you go back to Rome, you're going to have chicken wings. You're going to have lamb lollipops. You're going to have all of those things. Both wings and the sections from the rack of lamb were found in the Roman baths, from where people had taken snacks with them to the baths, and they found the remains of those bones in the drains and things like that. So, you know, if you want something that's a little fancier, some cold rack lamb sliced into lollipops would be nice as well. Think about things you could kebab, anything you could kebab. If you made kebabs ahead of time, take them off the skewer, leave them on the skewer, take them with you. Pre-cooked meats ready to go. Kebabs would be nice little snacks or treats to take along with you. When it comes to cookies and things, something easy to take is shortbread. Shortbread always has a special place in my heart. Butter, sugar, flour. How can you go wrong? But you can also spice up your shortbread if you want something different. Put a little lavender in it. Put some lemon zest in it. Just about any herb that you can think of, you could add to that delicious little piece of heaven, and you could have a nice little shortbread. If you have your own herb garden, it's as simple as walking out your back door. So I'm going to turn this back over to Isabel now for a little bit, because I feel like, or other folks to share things that they do, because I feel like I've just talked and talked and talked for the last few minutes. So I'm going to get quiet here for a minute.
So one thing that just occurred to me, if you're not familiar with the recipe, there is it's a meatball with almonds stuck into it, and it's called hedgehogs. And they are very commonly on snack tables and calendars here. They're the most adorable thing. You just make a meatball with kind of whatever. You know, we find a lot of pork and almond slices on the back, and and they're really easy to make. Porting them sometimes be kind of easy, as like those spines will break, but they're super adorable. They're very cute, and I posted a link in there. So it looks like William has a question.
So actually, it's funny you brought those up. That's usually the example I use of things I don't want to have to do, because I absolutely love them and they're delicious, especially when you make them with a few little spices thrown in. But I will eat like 8 or 10 of them as snacks because they're so delicious. But I don't want to have to put all of those together because it takes a really long time. So I was looking for ideas because I'm usually like, oh, you need to feed X number of people. It's like, oh, well, here's a stew and here's a large piece of meat to chop up. But I'm looking for ideas for snacks, especially easily pick upable and take away snacks that you don't have to individually fold, manipulate, or spend a whole bunch of time on.
I've got one for you, Wilhelm. It's very similar to the hedgehogs. And I found a period recipe called Hell's Balls. And my husband and I modified it. His name is Rafe, so we called them Rafe's Meaty Cheesy Fighter Balls. They are all protein. They don't have flour in them like the original recipe, so they're gluten-friendly. It's great. So basically you take sausage, you take cheese, and that's it. And you cook them in the oven. And I use a little bitty melon baller ice cream scoop, so it doesn't take a lot to manipulate them. 350 20 minutes, easy. We have regular sausage with a sharp cheddar. You want a hard cheese. And then typically we put bacon bits in there. We have an Italian recipe. We have a Mexican food type recipe, very similar to anything else that's out there, like a meatball. You can do hamburger if you want to, and then put in your other spices, things like that, and make them very similar to your hedgehogs. But it's just super quick and easy. That cheese keeps it together, packs it full of protein. I have used a vegan it was a vegan vegetarian sausage with a vegan goat cheese that bled a lot, but you can do it to where you make it vegan or vegetarian, but the ball doesn't stay contained. But those are easy, and every time I make them, people pop those up off a vigil table and they're gone first thing, because so many people concentrate on sweet instead of savory, and they just go super quick.
Another way to kind of shortcut if you're doing meatballs is to go ahead and just pat your meat into a 9x13 pan or whatever you're doing, and then take your spatula and score it so that you're making little meat square bites. So you can go through and score it and then bake it off. And then when you're done, you can go through and just go through those scores again. And they're not cute little round balls, but it is a much more time efficient way to do it. You just pat it in the pan, and it's like you're pre-cutting meatballs. Instead of putting all the meatballs in, you're pre-cutting it, and it will help it to come apart later. And then that way, when you pre-score it, it already has that initial cut in it that makes it a little easier as well.
So some people have some questions on whether or not other nut milks were used. I definitely know almond milk was everywhere. I did a quick Google search. I'm not coming up with any other nut milks. Does anyone know of any that were used a lot during the medieval period?
I don't, but I wanted to mention something real quick about making the sort of easier version of meatballs. The other thing that I've done successfully is take your meatball mix and put it in a cake pan. Or if you're making really thin ones, you can even do it in a deeper sheet pan. Smush it in so it's a flat layer, and then after everything cooks, and it cooks really quickly if you do it that way because it's thin, you just slice it up with a knife, and there you go. You get a little bit of crumbling, but you have a decent amount of time savings as well.
Another thing that's easy, if you just want, it's not necessarily meatball, but just buy some summer sausage from the grocery store, slice it up. It disappears quickly. It is extremely portable, and it's sausage. I mean, there probably are some modern ingredients in there, but it's one of those things that people just kind of ignore. Like, okay, yes, got preservatives, it's modern, but it's a throwback to an actual period thing, so it goes really well, and it's super easy. And you don't have to refrigerate it until you open it up. So as far as like almond flour and things like that, I'm not 100% sure about almond flour, but I do know they made beds from pulses, lentils, beans, stuff like that. Most bread people ate was it pure wheat bread. And there's a wonderful class later on today on breads and the types of breads, and he'll get into things like bread made out of lentils and bread made out of other pulses and other grains.
Yes, when wheat was scarce or barley was scarce, they would grind almost anything up to make their flour. Bread was a very staple food in the medieval times. The Vikings, made bread out of peas. Anything that they could grind into something suitable to create a bread out of, they did, just so they wouldn't go hungry.
And they even tried a few things that really didn't work well with the human system to try to be hungry, such as acorn flour. And when people got hungry, they would try just about anything.
I know that when wheat was scarce, the bakers would put sawdust in the bread to give it more volume until that was outlawed. So yeah, they would do anything just to be able to have something to eat, especially in hard times.
Yeah, the proliferation of adulteration laws in the medieval times were a little bit surprising that they had those quality standards. But they really did. So, does anyone else have any questions or anything they want to add?
Or any things they do that they would like to share.
So I was just wondering, since we're toward the end, we've talked a lot about snacks in particularly medieval Europe.
They're doing a whole cooking day for the SBA today.
That's a lot of people's focus. But I was wondering if anybody can speak to snacks, either for those who are doing events or personas, East Asia, Africa, the New World, just some of those kind of little more niche things.
Yes, I did a table on Middle Eastern food. I actually cooked chitlins and put them on a skewer and roast them. That's a medieval thing. They're pork on stick. I've done lots of Roman stuff. I've also done a recipe called Russian meatballs that's made with pork and chicken ground up and made into meatballs. There's lots of other recipes out there. You just gotta find it. My Chinese Mongolian was a rare find. It was I think it was 13th or 14th century. A poet actually was very, very picky about his eating habits. And so he basically wrote a cookbook with all the different recipes. If anybody would like to have a copy of that, message me later on and I will forward you the PDF file that I have on that. But it was really kind of neat. I laid out a whole table with all different kinds of things. I was surprised that there were a lot of people who tried the roasted chitlins and some of the other things. It was really good, and we were surprised that the Chinese did as much stuff as they did. They had bread that they rolls and steamed bread. So yeah, there's lots of other different areas. I'm Scottish, so I also do scones and things like that. I just,
If you're looking for some of the Chinese, look under shumai. Shumai were basically steamed ones that were filled with whatever. I don't know how to spell it correctly because I've only seen it from my sister-in-law in kanji. Shumai, I know the Filipinos do a bunch of things with glass noodles and chicken in there. My sister-in-law has done curried meats with vegetables in the bread, and you make it up ahead of time. You can freeze it, and then you just steam it in the little cups, and you just walk around with it. Also, the Japanese did a lot of things with vinegared rice, something in the center of the ball, and then wrapped it in seaweed. And I cannot tell you the name of that to save my life. I'm sorry.
That's onigiri.
Thank you.
A favorite of mine that we did at a feast for an appetizer was a Mongolian dish called yellow bird buns, normally made with it's a bao type dough, so it's super squishy but like very sturdy, and you can stick just about anything in it. But this one was done with chicken and Sichuan peppercorns, and it's really, really delicious.
Someplace else you might want to look, a couple suggestions is you might check out it's Andalusian. It's not actually Middle Eastern, but if you look at the Anonymous Andalusian, you can get a lot of good basic things from there. It's a nice place to start. It's actually where I got my introduction to SCA cooking, and Duke Karayadoc actually has a site that has it all translated and everything on there. There's also another site that is for online cookbooks that is a really good place to find, and I will try to type it into the comments here in just a second, but the web address is really easily as well. It's medievalcookery.com is where it's at. And if you were to just search medievalcookery.com and online cookbooks, they have a listing of several cookbooks. They have Andalusia, Denmark, England, France, Germany, Hungary, Italy, Netherlands, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Russia, and Spain. And if you're like me, you would love to have all of the different cookbooks out there in the whole world. But I just don't have the space, or to be quite honest, the funds to have every book that I would like to have referring to documentation on things. So it might be a place to take a look at if you're looking for something new, that it might at least give you a place to start with. You, oh, that looks interesting. Let me see what I can find more about this dish. It's backwards documentation, but it might give you an idea of a place to start.
Mm-hmm. So it is just a few minutes before 9 Central Time. There are several wonderful 9 o'clock classes starting soon. This meeting is still going to be open for a little bit past 9 for anyone who wants to stay in here. However, I wanted to make sure people who wanted to go to the 9 o'clock class is able to. Thank you so much for joining us, and I do want to apologize for the change of topic a little bit in this class, but please enjoy the rest of the day.
Isabel, you did a nice job.
Thank you.
I'm in the office today, so I don't get to be in garb, but you know, that's really what it does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really, the hat and the veil makes it look way more impressive than it is. This is just a basic dress that I'm wearing underneath this, but you know,
yeah,
the hat, the veil, and the fake hair makes everything look really impressive.
And since it's Zoom, it only has to be this much.
Yeah, I've actually got her around the waist and I just got shorts on, so like, yeah. So, Thank you guys so much for joining us, and hopefully you'll enjoy the rest of the day.
Enjoy. Cheers. See you later, episode.
Batista, thank you so much for your help.
I'll get off mute and say, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I was expecting and hoping to see Fiondo, but
Yeah, she messaged me about half an hour before we opened, maybe a little bit before that, and let me know she was sick. So I'm like, searching through like what I have. I'm like, okay, what can we do? Because, but
yeah.
specs are fun.
Okay, I found the Chinese cookbook or the cook thing, so I'm going to try and get it posted here. Come on, I hate Zoom.
There's also going to be a roundtable discussion later on today that talks about putting together a list of resources.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and end the recording.
Okay.
But thank you so much for joining us.
All right.